My name's Riley Priddle, the co-founder here at FireTail. Today I'm going to give you a product overview of the Python code library called FireTail. So the purpose of this API library is to allow you to define your API within the OpenAPI standard and it to, on startup, set the API up on Flask. So you can define your routes, your methods, your path parameters and query string parameters and how they should look. So here we have a products endpoint that has a get method, it has an operation ID, and this links directly to the code function. So by a request coming into this endpoint, it will call main.getProducts. So main is here, and this is getProducts here, and this will return back a list of products. Furthermore, with parameters, you can specify the required parameters. You can specify if they're actually required or not, and you can validate on a regular expression pattern. This one here will validate with alphanumeric. So if a query comes in that does not conform, it will return a 400 error code with a message. You can also specify the security on this endpoint. Here we have JWT and API key. If I just scroll down to the bottom here, you can see that these are defined here. For JWT, this attribute here maps it to the code function. So this will end up calling JWT decoder.decodeToken, which is here, decode token. And this function takes the token in and will validate whether the token is valid or not. If it is not valid, it will raise an unauthorized exception here, which will return a 401 from the API. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to run this API. Okay, now this API is running. What I'm going to do is I'm going to call this API. Okay, so here we have Postman running. And we're going to call this endpoint that's running on localhost, as you can see here. So if I call a get here, you can see that it's missing the query string parameter category. So we're going to add that in now. And now the API is returning. As you can see here within the OpenAPI document, there is a pattern that only allows alphanumeric characters. So what we're going to do is we're going to come back here and we're going to add a non-alphanumeric, so put an @ here, and this should return an error. As you can see there, clothing @ does not conform to the pattern, and this is a 400 request, and this response can be modified as well. We can also turn off the requirement there. And we can drop that here, and that returns back everything now. I'm going to now show you a authentication example. This endpoint / products and a get method has a security schema of JWT. And so in Postman here, I'm going to call this with the authorization attribute there. And you can see that it returns back a valid response of products. Now, if I remove this, you can see that it says no authorization token provided. If I provide the token again, but now I add something that's invalid, you'll get a 401 response saying that the authorization bearer token is invalid. Now, if I try and call an endpoint that doesn't exist, endpoint does not exist, you can see that it returns a 404. If I call the products endpoint with a method that is not set up, so post, you can see that the method is not allowed for this request as a response, and it's a 405. So what I'm going to demonstrate now is how you can have API requests logged to your own custom backend or a SaaS platform backend. So what you do within the library is you import the cloud logger from FireTail.auditor, and then you set up the cloud logger. Now, this means that there is a event that happens for every request. It'll put it into a pool, and then it will send in groups those logs, or individually if there's not that many requests coming in. For your own endpoint, you set this custom backend to true. You set your own endpoint, and this posts logs in line delimited plain text. Now I'm going to show you this running. So I start up my log endpoint to illustrate, and I start the app. I'm going to make a request that is bad. So we're going to post to the products endpoint, which doesn't exist. And you can see this is a 405 response. And we can see here that there's a request that's come into the log endpoint. I'm going to copy this into my notepad. And as you can see here, this is what gets logged. So you can see the URL, full URL endpoint. You can see the headers, the paths, the IP address, any query string parameters that are passed, or any path parameters. You also get the full response, headers, body, status code, and we also extrapolate out the OAuth sub from the token that's provided, and this allows you to map the user to the call.
Thank you very much for watching this demo of FireTail, an open source library for inline API call inspection, including the ability to apply preventative blocking measures if calls do not conform to the security specification of the API endpoint. FireTail also includes the ability to log API call events to either a local or a cloud-based platform.